Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about Kundalini, the very good, crazy topic that everyone wants to know about, right? Uh, and also a very confusing topic, a very esoteric topic. Um, and I'll say, just as um, something that can maybe, make you uh, trust that I'm not just some random person. I'm initiated into a Kriya lineage, and we talk about Kundalini. We understand Kundalini. Um, so a lot of what I am giving you is from the teachings from my guru, but also from my own experience and understanding. Um, like some of it, a lot of the specifics I learned from my own experience. Um, but a lot of the broader stuff, the practices and that kind of thing, um, a lot of it's gathered in from my lineage. But basically, what is Kundalini? One of the simplest ways to explain Kundalini is that it is consciousness in its active form. It's making this appear right now in front of you. It's making the image of me appear. It's making the image of your body appear. Consciousness in its active form, in its manifested form. And this is juxtaposed and contrasted with Shiva, because Kundalini is also known as Shakti, the universal energy, which makes all of creation appear. So, and Shiva is the unmanifested, the inert, the inactive form of consciousness, which is still, it's not moving. Kundalini is moving, it's doing all this, glittering and all that. And Shiva is just Shiva. It's just sitting there, doing nothing. So, before I get into sort of how those relate in a deeper context, I just want to maybe briefly touch on like what Kundalini is not. Kundalini is not spine energy. It is not the activation of the chakras. It is not the activation of energy. Some of these things can accompany what can be called a Kundalini awakening. All of these energetic experiences. But what's really happening when you're experiencing all of that energy is your consciousness is rising and expanding to encompass more of the subconscious. So everything that was like hidden to you, that was veiled, so to speak, by your subconscious, which is kind of not generally useful in everyday life. Now you're getting meditative and you're starting to experience that. So a lot of people associate this rising energy and this activation, feelings of energy with Kundalini. But it's really more so that your consciousness has risen and expanded and become more fine-tuned, that you're able to sense all of this stuff. So what's really happening is the Kundalini, the consciousness, is rising and approaching Shiva, which, what is Shiva? And what is the merging of Kundalini and Shiva and Shakti and Shiva? Putting that in very basic terms, it is the journey from normal everyday consciousness to samadhi. And samadhi is a state of being, you could say, where you have no sensory perception. You have, in the highest form of samadhi, no mental activity. It doesn't mean that you're kind of gone in a trance. The reality of Shiva is very much there, but there's no like signs of it. It's very hard to explain. It's not like sleep. Sleep is just this total unconsciousness. And samadhi is super conscious. It's very intense, especially in the earlier forms of samadhi. But the highest form of samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi or nirbija samadhi, it's very indescribable. And so what is happening when Kundalini is rising, to go back to Shiva, the sort of story behind it is that Shakti is always longing to go back to Shiva so that they can merge as one. And so what's happening is that it is your consciousness, this consciousness that's manifesting this, which is longing to go back to its source, to go where it came from. One of the things that can sort of hinder this going back to the source, going back to Shiva, is blockages and hindrances and attachments and desires that keep us grabbing onto the world, and it keeps us, in a way, it keeps Kundalini locked into manifesting the world. And this is sort of rebirth, and this idea of being trapped in samsara. The Kundalini is locked by your desires, by your attachments, by your blockages and ignorances. It's locked into manifesting the world and manifesting birth after birth. So one of the ways that you can think about it, or rather I should say, one of the ways you can think about cleaning the way, or imagining what it takes for Kundalini to rise to Samadhi, to rise back to Shiva, is that you have to clean yourself out. And you have to let go. You have to do actual real work in this regard, in one form or another, to come to a more detached place, so that you're not clinging all the time. And this is hard. It's very hard. So don't beat yourself up. If you're not enlightened on the first day, that's not really how it works. But one of the practices that my lineage teaches is Om Japa. And Japa means repetition or chanting. So Om, the sound, it's mentioned in the Upanishads, and specifically the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, where the body is mentioned as the lower Om, the lower form of Om. And in a way, the body, the world, this is Kundalini, this quote-unquote lower form of Shiva. It's not really lower, but it kind of just, in one way of saying it, like one thing's up here, another thing's down here, not like superior or inferior. But so the body is the lower Om, and by taking the Om mantra, which is representing the higher form of Om, the pure Om, the unmanifested Om, by sending Om into the body, it's like rubbing 2 sticks of wood together to produce the fire of clarity and realization, enlightenment, and samadhi. So basically, more specifically, what is going on, like how are you doing the Om practice? The way it's taught is it's a mental thing. So you're not chanting it externally, you're chanting it mentally. The mantra sound is just Om. It's not necessarily Aum or not anything like that. Om, just Om. And one thing to avoid when you're just starting out, and when I say just starting out, I mean like beginner to like 3 years, really, is to not chant Om into the head, because you want to clear out all of the lower chakras before you start messing with the head, because it can throw you off balance. So there is a video I can link below about how to internally feel the chakras. And briefly I will talk about what chakras are. I think that's important to mention, because a lot of people think of chakras as like this metaphysical, like flower, or some kind of thing that's just sitting there doing a thing. Not really. It's not really what it is. This is kind of a misconception, a popularized version of some helpful imagery that yogis use to sort of map out what's going on. So essentially the chakras are a projection of mental behavior. So you can think of it similar to how the kidney, it does not have tactile nerves. So when something's wrong with the kidney, what does it do? It projects that pain out to the hips, to the back, or wherever it needs to be. Same with like a heart attack. It projects the pain into the left arm or wherever. So the same thing is true with the brain. The brain does not have tactile nerves. So what does it do? Boom, projects it into the body where it can feel and relate to these emotions and feelings and attachments. So, for instance, you might have a cold pit of fear in the stomach, or butterflies in your stomach. Most people know what butterflies in the stomach feels like. This butterflies in your stomach, this fear in the stomach, it originates in the right amygdala in the brain. But the right amygdala, just like the rest of the brain, doesn't have tactile nerves. Boom, sends it right into the stomach. Another thing is true, like when you feel like your personal space is being violated, or some of your possessions are being violated, this ownership is being violated, your butt clenches up, doesn't it? So that's another projection of a mental behavior into the body. So these feelings inside, maybe love in the heart, or tightness in the heart, like emotional tightness. This is what we're chanting Om into. This is what is keeping us bound to the world, which is keeping us bound to manifestation, bound to creation, and is preventing us from experiencing the unmanifested state, the non-dual state. So by chanting Om into this, just like what it says, where it's like rubbing wood against wood, this is rubbing against that, and it sort of silences it and clears it out. And one way that I've kind of understood this, and the scientific stuff is lagging as to what's happening, why does this practice work, but one theory is that I'm sure you may know that when yogis go deep into meditation, they hear this Om vibration. So the theory is that what they're hearing is the nervous system. Sort of, its activation is what you're hearing. So if the nervous system is vibrating with Om, then chanting Om into that, it kind of acts like an interference pattern. So you have like two waves that go, and then they meet, and then they flatten out. That's an interference pattern. So in a similar way, by chanting Om into it, it cancels out and flattens and sort of silences that activation of the nervous system. And it's not like repression. Repression is like a counter-activation of something else. But Om clears it out. clears it out. And that's sort of one thing to do to prevent imbalances. It can help you to stay grounded. So one thing that leads people to getting very ungrounded, or just a general experience of being ungrounded, is extreme activation of the chakras. You feel all this energy. Chant Om into that. Om, Om. And a few times is enough. You can do it however much you want. And what you want to do is feel. And feel, Om, feel, and see if it's doing anything. And you'll know that your Om practice is working, because you'll feel much cleaner. You'll feel much more still. You'll feel silencing of the chakras, of all this activation. So some other stuff that can help with grounding in general is being barefoot on grass, on dirt. This is something very simple, and I understand if you have your sensory needs, you have your disabilities or whatever, you can't do that, that's fine. There's other ways of grounding. But Om Japa is one way of grounding. Barefoot on the grass is a popular way of grounding. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do ever. Interestingly, and there's one thing to say if you're a vegetarian. However, eating things like chicken, I wouldn't advise beef just because I'm a Hindu. But things like chicken, very calorie dense foods, very nutrient dense foods, protein dense foods, so even nuts could help. Eating foods like that can help with grounding. And another major important part of grounding is surrender. You want to be surrendered to what is happening, because resisting it kind of makes it worse. It's similar to trying to repress your emotions. It just builds and builds and builds, and it'll spill out eventually. So you have to let go. You have to let it do what it's going to do. And you can do Om Japa through all of that, but letting go of your ability to control all of this, because all of this energy that you're feeling, it's the movements of your own mind, the movements of your own consciousness, which needs to do something. It needs to get out all of this pent up energy. So allow it. Don't try to control it and grab it. That will mess you up. It will make it worse. And one thing that Om Japa does, Om is not a repression practice. Om quickens the processing of it. It quickens how easily you're able to transmute this anxiety or attachment or fear, how quickly you're able to transmute that into something like peace, into bliss, into love. And that's really all I have to share today. If there are questions, please ask them. I'll do my best to answer. I hope this was very informative. I hope that helped you to gain a better understanding of Kundalini in a more practical sense. I might make a video more specifically on what Samadhi is, so you have a more context for that. That being said, take care.